So David and I are co-moderating this panel. So good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Joel Sandler. I'm an associate partner with Ipsos Healthcare Advisory. My work focuses on helping biopharma companies navigate commercial strategy across product lifestyle from early pipeline through launch, life cycle management, and portfolio strategy. I'm thrilled to be here, co-chairing today's discussion along with David Reisinger from Leerink. And we're fortunate to have an outstanding panel representing a range of perspectives across large pharma and emerging biotech. Just a few kind of initial thoughts to set the context, and then I'll ask David, and then we'll go down the line and ask each of our panelists to self-introduce, and then we'll get into the discussion. When I think about this discussion today, and why it's particularly timely, it comes down to a fairly simple observation. For years, the obesity field was defined by what it could not do. We had treatments that delivered modest weight loss, recurring safety concerns, limited adoption, and a persistent gap between lifestyle intervention and bariatric surgery. Then, almost overnight, by industry standards, semaglutide and tirzepatide changed that conversation. And so the debate is no longer whether obesity can be treated pharmacologically. That question has largely been answered. The more interesting question now is what comes next. And importantly, what comes next does not necessarily mean, as we've been talking about, what replaces GLP-1. In many ways, the success of GLP-1 therapies has created a new set of opportunities and challenges for the field. We're now asking about durability. Tim, in the prior fireside, mentioned 70 to 80% of patients fall off within 1 to 2 years on GLP-1 therapy. So what happens when patients stop treatment? We're asking questions about body composition and the quality of weight loss. We're asking questions about access, affordability, adherence, and how to scale these therapies to enormous populations that could potentially benefit from them. And increasingly, we're asking whether obesity therapy should even be thought of primarily as weight loss drugs, or whether we're entering a broader era of metabolic disease modification spanning cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, liver disease, sleep apnea, and beyond. What's particularly fascinating for me is that many of the industry's most strategic decisions are being shaped by these questions. For large established players, the challenge is how to build on extraordinary success and extend leadership beyond today's products. For emerging biotech, the challenge is different. It's identifying where meaningful differentiation still exists in a market increasingly anchored around powerful incumbent therapies. And for investors and healthcare systems writ large, the question is where sustainable value will ultimately be created as the field evolves. So that's really the backdrop for today's conversation. We'll explore where the biggest unmet needs remain, which emerging mechanisms and approaches appear most promising, how the competitive landscape is evolving, and what all of this may mean for patients, providers, and the broader healthcare system over the next several years. And we have exactly the right group to help us unpack these questions. We have perspectives from established leaders helping shape the current standard of care, emerging companies pursuing differentiated approaches, and scientific leaders working at the forefront of next generation innovation. With that, I'd like to turn first to my co-moderator, David, for a brief introduction, and then we'll work our way across the panel. So David.
Excellent. Well, for anybody that walked in a little late, my name is Dave Reisinger. I cover Diversified Biopharmaceuticals at Leerink Partners, which is a healthcare investment bank I write research as a sell-side analyst. Our key clients are the buy-side institutions that invest in healthcare stocks, whether it be Fidelity or T. Rowe Price or hedge funds. And just to note, since we got started late with this panel, and I think everyone wants to get back probably on time. Hope you had your coffee. We may need to skip the coffee break so we can get back on track to start the next panel at 11:40. And with that, I'll pass it down the line. Anna.
Okay, thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Zhang. I'm representing Hoffmann-La Roche. If you're not familiar with the name, you may be more familiar with our Genentech name, and that's our affiliate in the US. So I'm part of the corporate business development team, and we have been really instrumental in working with the rest of our organization to achieve our ambition of becoming one of the key major players in CVRM. And for us, it's, as you may have heard this morning, it's not just obesity, it's not just diabetes, but it's really thinking about the whole cardiovascular metabolism field, including kidney and liver and all the comorbidities. So I won't steal the thunder from the panel discussions, but just to mention that we do have a booth set up at the Parallel ADA. Our CEO, Pharma, Tercy Graham, is also at the ADA this year, really to show also how important this new area is for us. We have also our diagnostics colleagues who are present to make sure that the synergies that we have within the company of having pharma and diet together can really come together and help us build what is really a portfolio that offers options for patients. So really looking forward to an exciting discussion. Please do stop by and also join some of the oral presentations that our colleagues and our investigators will be presenting. Thanks.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Beuchat. Can you hear me? And I'm at Novo Nordisk. And for the last 3 years, I headed up the Novo Nordisk research as a therapeutic area head for diabetes and obesity. Very recently, I started a new role anchored in external innovation. And previously, I have experience working at Pfizer, Merck, and also at Eli Lilly. And we have several former colleagues of Lilly at this forum. So it's almost a Lilly mini reunion. My role at Lilly was actually just mentioned in the fireside chat. Before this, I built and led the Lilly China R&D Center. It was very good experience and success story in a way. Now many good biotechs started from the colleagues originated in that center. So for back to the obesity, this forum, the main topic, we really see obesity not as a single disease per se. It is really interesting. Obese people actually don't see themselves as being sick or as a patient. So we tend to call people with obesity versus obese patient per se. And it's a mindset change. And how do we view the many, like a billion people overweight or with obesity? Obesity is associated with over 200 complications or comorbid conditions, including metabolic, cardiovascular, and mechanical. And there's ample space to continue to innovate to address many of the unmet needs in these constellation of all complicated conditions. So looking forward to the discussion to unpack many of these topics.
Hi, I'm Brian Bloomquist. I'm the Chief Business and Strategy Officer of Alveus Therapeutics, probably not on everyone's hit parade of names. But we started 2 years ago and are engaged in creating a set of next generation assets, near next generation assets, which we'll talk about in the course of the presentation, that are differentiated in key ways from existing therapeutics. My background, as is Bay's, is Eli Lilly. Before Eli Lilly, I was on the bench at Biopharmaceuticals doing obesity research decades ago, responsible for new target development at that point. Joined Lilly 20 years ago, was at Lilly for 18 years, responsible for diabetes, obesity, external innovation, brought in orforglipron, dacros, other things. And then I joined 2 years ago, Alveus, and along with our CSO, Jakob Jeppesen of Novo, ex-Novo, we were tasked to create a portfolio that we felt pharma would be interested in, and we'll talk about that today.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Coleman. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Kailera Therapeutics. Thanks to Dave for a few of the shout outs this morning. I joined Kailera, which we're a clinical stage biopharma company out of the Boston area. We have 4 assets, all GLP-1 based. Actually, the lead asset, Beuchat, has data both for the injectable and the oral here at ADA this year. We've been here for quite a few years now, and we'll talk more about Beuchat and others as we go on. I joined also from Lilly just about 2 years ago, a few months after company formation. I think Joel mentioned the quote-unquote overnight success of incretins, which most know is not truly the story. But I will say I was leading the U.S. Trulicity brand when Ozempic became a weight loss drug overnight, back when Trulicity was Lilly's $5 billion behemoth, if you will, and now that's kind of a rounding error on tirzepatide. But I also launched Zepbound for the U.S., so have been on the commercial space of this market for a long time. Very much still believe we're in the early innings, and excited to talk about the opportunities of the future and for Kailera.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, finally me. I'm Tang-Christensen, probably from the smallest company with the smallest pipeline, which is not a bad thing because then you stay focused. We work with GIP antagonists primarily, currently also a clinical phase company going into phase 2A, and also running backup projects still with this sense that GIP antagonism is the way to go. We kept the name to Antag so we can actually take on more projects just as long as they're antagonists to whatever has been done. And that's also our position in the GIP discussion and agonist antagonist, that is that we are on the antagonist side. Prior, I'm CSO of Antag Therapeutics, been here for 4 years. Prior to that, I had base job at Novo Nordisk. So I've been 15 years at Novo Nordisk, started the whole obesity journey at Novo Nordisk, did Saxenda, semaglutide, the whole 9 yards. And since 2022, I've been with Antag and several other small companies. And I think that David's comments around what's next is very, very important because I can see some fatigue in here that the incretin is the end all be all. And I can assure you that's not the case. It's even more exciting what's to come because it's not GLP-1 for sure.
Excellent. Okay, so now we'll get into the questions, and if there are any questions from the audience, feel free to shout them out or raise your hand. But given that the first half of the title of the panel is around unmet needs, and I think it's important to frame any innovation that's happening in the pipeline, whether it's incremental modifications to existing approaches or adjunct approaches or completely novel mechanisms, you first have to start with what are the unmet needs today. So perhaps either Jamie or Bei, if you want to start, what do you see as the primary limiting factors today, considering semaglutide and tirzepatide with their enormous success, but also kind of perhaps providing some constraints that can be addressed with additional future facing work?
Maybe I could start with this discussion. I think we have all witnessed the tremendous effect of GLP-1 incretin molecules, semaglutide, tirzepatide, etc. But there are still a good number of needs in terms of how you maintain the weight loss efficacy. Once how you extend the stay time on these medicines. And then we all know once the people taking with obesity or other condition, comorbid conditions, stop taking the medicine, A1C goes up, body weight goes up, and so forth. So how do we have the mechanisms, new mechanisms, or new way to use these medicine to maintain, sustain weight loss effect or other metabolic benefits? That's one significant need. Also, the tolerability issues, as mentioned earlier, that's a really big, significantly ease to use, convenience, etc. So, in short, there's still significant unmet needs in this space, despite the tremendous efficacy of GLP-1. Maybe Jamie could comment further on
Thank
that.
you. I would agree. A couple of thoughts. I mean, I think it's maybe a slightly different take on it, but I honestly believe the greatest unmet need is just education, acceptance, and treatment of obesity as a chronic disease. Most of the barriers that we have, whether they're treatment rates, Ken mentioned earlier these 2% treatment rates. We all know access is an issue. We heard about Cigna this morning. We know people don't stay on it for lots of reasons, many of which are just we don't see this as a chronic disease. We don't ask people, how long do you have to stay on your diabetes medication? You have to stay on it. And so over time, I believe that if that can change, then many of the barriers will lower. And then the innovations that this whole panel is behind can actually really make a difference. It's clear when there's 1 billion people in the world suffering, and maybe even more, that there's plenty of opportunity for unmet need, plenty of space, and anything in chronic care is going to require it at all. It's going to require efficacy, tolerability, ease of use, access, and like I said, education. Kailera, especially for Rebupatide, we're actually very focused on amount of weight loss. That's a bit contrarian opinion from the audience today and or the panels earlier in this. But really the truth is there are substantial weight loss needs that still exist with not a small portion of the population, with tens of millions of people who need weight loss that's greater than what today's options that could provide. So that's where we're really focused for Rebupatide. We can talk more about that, not at the expense of tolerability, ease of use, all those things, but really we still believe there's an opportunity to differentiate on the amount of weight loss before we can help people maintain that weight loss.
If I may ask or add to that, I think we also have to keep in mind of all the comorbidities. It's not just the weight loss as was discussed this morning. We also are learning more and more about what the GLP-1s and the incretins can do. So besides that, what else can we complement? Can we keep the patients as our key focus and try to expand from there? So I think that is where some of the unmet medical needs can expand.
Maybe I can sort of follow up. I think I completely agree that the whole GLP-1 era has been one sort of gigantic success. Basically, when I started out in 2010 at Novo Nordisk, we said if we get to 8%, 10% weight loss, we would be happy, and double digit before I would retire, I would be happy, and you would too, right? And then all of a sudden we got semaglutide in 2016 with double digit weight loss and basically a patient pool, which we hadn't experienced before. We went through the whole Saxenda story where it was almost impossible to get people to take treatment, even though we could see health benefits from an 8% weight loss. So I agree with that. I think one of the key aspects of incretin biology is that the weight loss that you get is basically driven by a reduction of energy intake. And energy intake basically doesn't discriminate when it tries to harness calories from the body. And that's also seen in the kind of weight loss that incretin gives you. It gives a weight loss of obviously fat, but also lean mass. And as long as you stay on therapy, that's not a problem. But as my good colleagues are talking to, the fact that patients don't stay on therapy, they will get off therapy quite readily, quite quickly, but also even after having experienced a weight loss of maybe 10, 15, 20%. And that's where the problem sets in with the incretin class, because the way that you regain your weight is not by putting on muscle, which you would hope. It's basically by putting on fat. So you're basically, if you cycle, then you can basically cycle your way into a really poor metabolic place if we don't solve for that. So key issues in where we're still lacking in the incretin space is obviously tolerability, which you can get back to. I think Kailera's approach of having a lower peak to trough is excellent. But then there is also this preferential weight loss where I think we should access or aim at fat, because that's the problem in cardiometabolic disease. It's not necessarily muscle. So preferential weight loss of fat is where new targets should be found and go to.
And I'll just echo what Matt said. I do think that the world, with many things, many incretins, GLP-based incretins, such as Kailera's in late-stage clinical development, from a small biotech thinking about next-generation strategy, the world doesn't need yet another weight loss agent. We have a lot of them in development, and if you want to differentiate yourself as a smaller company, really it has to be a quality of weight loss, as Mads was talking about, or it's got to be significantly improved durability. Orforglipron and Foundayo, their once daily option will be Wegovy, oral Wegovy, once daily option are expanding the market. They're very interesting. They're getting people interested in the space, but that is also fatiguing. If you're especially if you have a high pill burden, it's a lot of memory memory space to take these drugs every day. If you don't take them for a time with GLPs, you're going to lose the efficacy. You're going to have potential nausea, etc. So you need durable treatments, and that's what Alveus is focusing on, where you can deliver a weight loss agent. And again, we like Antag Therapeutics, our lead molecule, so GIPR antagonist, will deliver efficacy out beyond 3 months with a single injection. So that's where we think the patient population will say, wow, that's a change in quality of life. And even though all these other drugs are amazingly effective and a great advance in human health.
Maybe I'd love for you to follow on a little bit. There's a lot of talk about novel mechanisms. Obviously, there's been some debate about GIP antagonists. Lilly and Novo have said we're very happy with our GIP agonists. So maybe, Matt, you could just comment on that. And then Brian, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, that's my favorite topic. I think it's clear that one of the really big problems with preclinical research in obesity is that most mechanisms do not translate, except for one that we are sort of saluting now, and that's the incretins. You can basically go to a mouse, a cat, a dog, a pig, a monkey. It all responds to GLP-1. If you go to GIP, then you have an excessive weight loss in mouse models with an agonist. But if you take that into clinic, the weight loss drops like a rock. So Lilly have shown, and Novo Nordisk have shown in quite substantial sort of studies that the amount of weight loss you can experience with a pure GIP agonist is around 2%, and that's it. So basically, what we are seeing is that's what we can expect from a GIP agonist. What we can expect from a GIP antagonist, I'm looking also a little bit at Brian. We don't know yet, because I think the ones that we can answer that question, and hopefully in a year's time or so. But for that answer, I only think that Amgen would have that answer with their single antibody against the GIP. But obviously, we hope for more. But again, as Brian alluded to, maybe it's not about weight loss, right? And GIP agonist and GIP antagonist. It's basically what can we do with a GIP antagonist that we can't do with a GIP agonist. And I think there are some important differences. There's been a lot of discussion around GIP's effect on the ability to dose up GLP-1. So it's antiemetic. There's some solid data from the ferret and the shrew, where you can basically block emesis if you give a GIP agonist in high doses. That data doesn't not fully translate. I'm not saying that it doesn't translate, but it doesn't fully translate into man. The only thing, when we went into our phase 1, and we'll present that on Sunday, we were scared that Lilly were right, that a GIP agonist would work antiemetic, and that would drive the argument that a GIP antagonist would basically make you puke. Lo and behold, when we did it, we didn't see that at all. So we could go all the way up to 380 milligrams of a GIP antagonist in a single dose without any nausea. So there's something that we do not understand, again, from the preclinical to the clinical. So in reality, it doesn't, and I'm saying something that I'm probably going to get punished from my board when I get home. It doesn't really matter what the name is, if it's a GIP agonist and GIP antagonist. What we need to look at is the clinical data. And the clinical data will be clear once we have conducted the studies. But for now, I'm rooting for the orange team with me and Brian. Right, so, and Amgen.
And I'll just do very quick, because Mads answered that very comprehensively. But remember that tirzepatide, certainly Jakob Jeppesen and I, when we joined Alveus, and we thought, well, what assets are we going to create our portfolio with? And we thought a GIPR antagonist. Wait a minute, I've just been with Lilly for 18 years. Does that make sense? And we looked at the science, we thought about it, and we said, we're going to make this bet. We think it's really interesting. And I think, the blocking the counter-regulatory mechanisms that the body puts in place when it's in a fasting state, GIP antagonism does that. Multiple other effects. Remember, tirzepatide was being developed for diabetes. A GIP agonist is an insulin secretagogue sensitizer, so it makes a lot of sense in the context of diabetes. And then Novo sort of brought the whole concept to obesity, and it turns out tirzepatide worked beautifully in obesity as well. So it's a fascinating biology. Also noted, I think it was March last year, Lilly was an author on a paper, I think it was Nature Metabolism, where they showed in rodent models, GIP agonism and antagonism both cause weight loss by slightly different mechanisms. So it's fascinating science and interesting clinical data as well.
Excellent. Before we pivot to additional discussion on novel mechanisms, I thought it would be helpful, Jamie, for you to talk a little bit about going beyond your injectable candidate and your vision for unmet need in oral drug development.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So Kailera, we have 2 injectables and 2 oral medications. So if you look, they're all GLP-1 based. So we have single, dual, triple, small molecules, peptides, and then injectables and orals. So really collectively believe that patients are going to need more than one option. There was a question earlier about who will be the winner. I think if you add up all the scripts and look at market share, obviously there'll be a quote unquote winner. But really when there's 1 billion patients, and especially for the patients of highest unmet need, this is a chronic disease where people are going to need more than one option, very likely. So to me, it's an and conversation, not an or. The injectables are very focused on those that have the highest weight loss needs because that's what injectables have shown they're able to do today. The orals market's super exciting, especially as a commercial person watching Wegovy launch and then watching Foundayo come in and seeing commercial strategies and the adoptions of these and how many people have actually been sitting on the sidelines waiting for an oral pill is very exciting. But neither one of these is the perfect solution yet. Certainly they're great advancements, and I think patient satisfaction is generally very high. Our thesis at Kailera is that the efficacy for orals will be largely undifferentiated. You kind of have these low teens-ish weight loss just from the chemistry of the oral molecules, at least in the next 5-ish, maybe even 10 years. But that tolerability will be an area to differentiate. The tolerability for orals is, generally speaking, not as good as the injectables. And I know people think orals are convenient, but I'm a contrarian here as well. I think taking something every single day is less convenient than every week or every 3 months, et cetera. So you're making a choice every day to take that molecule. And so I think tolerability will really matter here. And our oral Beuchat in particular has a very interesting tolerability profile. That data will be here at this conference, and we're really excited to see the potential of that.
Thank you. That's great. So we were just chatting. I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I think pivoting now towards novel mechanisms, anything that jumps out, and maybe putting that into the context not just of novelty for the sake of novelty when we're already achieving 20 to 30% weight loss, thinking about specific use cases. So how do you think about these different novel mechanisms in terms of perhaps addressing distinct patient subsets or an improvement on kind of the first movers in terms of the quality of weight loss or the tolerability, perhaps as an adjunct to a GLP-1 that enables you perhaps to dose reduce the GLP-1 component and maintain improved safety tolerability, reduce discontinuation without sacrificing efficacy per se. So I realize that's a bit of a multi-part question. So maybe we just start with kind of novel mechanisms, and but it would be great to kind of put that in the context of not just what's novel about it, but so what. And so either Anna or Bay or Mads, if either of you want to jump in on that.
Maybe I could start with commenting on in our portfolio, the next wave of mechanism coming, it's in late clinical trial phase 3 or in already CagriSema, the combining unimolecular format of amylin and GLP-1 zenagamtide already started phase 3 trial. The fixed dose combination CagriSema already filed with FDA, NDA filed, so combining the amylin biology and then also GLP-1, potentially having clinical data demonstrated additional benefit to your question. The amylin biology is very intriguing. It's distinct from GLP-1 biology, potentially having benefits on muscle, on bone, and on other comorbid conditions that we just spoke about. In addition, beyond these known mechanisms that multiple companies are working on, maybe speaking to even next wave, newer targets, novel mechanism to be discovered and engaged on. Earlier today, we talked about AI in drug discovery. There is ample data out there now, human genetics, multi-omics, so leveraging AI and machine learning and so forth, hopefully we could couple that with patient phenogrouping, understanding the really obesity is not one single disease. It's very complex pathophysiology underlying it. Potentially, by leveraging all these data, we could define new mechanism targeted for specific patient population and specific comorbid conditions.
I can only second what they has shared. I think for us, the obvious next wave, or even the current wave, are the combinations coming. All the companies are working on it. We're also a big fan of amylin, so through our partnership with Zealand. We also see, I think, with the new discovery, and you hear from the colleagues, the debate about the antagonists and agonists for GIP, it's still showing that there's a lot we still need to learn and understand. And so with additional companies, additional research going into this area, we can discover new mechanisms to further expand. And I want to go back to my point on the comorbidities as well. So, for example, you heard this morning that, yes, GLP-1s, some people think it's good for everything. And it may be, but for other diseases where it's more specific or where the body has already deteriorated, MASH, I'm thinking, F3, F4, GLP-1 may not be enough. So for us, we're looking at FGF21. Can we put that together to help? So I think the next wave, and yes, there are other genetically based mechanisms that we're all exploring, but I think there are also things we can play with that we have on the table today to really bring additional benefits for patients.
Could I just ask you to comment a little bit more about Roche's activities? So you mentioned that a senior executive is here at ADA. Could you just remind us, the event path ahead for your existing pipeline, what we should be watching? Because there's a lot of discussion about, Pfizer and Amgen being in phase 3. We've chatted with Jamie about Kailera and others, but would love to just hear the outlook for Roche and what we should be watching.
Thanks for the question, Dave. I'm very excited. I think for us, and I was part of the team that brought the Carmel acquisition into Roche to get our foundation incretins. So we have enicepatide coming out. I believe at ADA, we do have oral presentations. This is our CT388 dual agonist GLP-GIP. So that's coming out, and there are advantages that we believe to current available therapies that we are quite excited about. We have also, if you remember, done a partnership with Alnylam to expand into hypertension. So that is another thing that, again, as mentioned by one of the audience in the morning, CV is also part of the whole package that we're looking into. We talked about MASH, so with pegozafermin. That's also through our 89 Bio acquisition. So that's something we're also excited about. Data is reading out believe next year, the first set, and then in 28. So that's coming up as well. So we do have quite a pipeline, and please expect to hear more and more from Roche Genentech.
Thank you.
So in terms of novel mechanisms, I always take great pride in saying it's easy to be in obesity research because there's only two mechanisms. Either you stop eating or you increase your energy intake or energy expenditure. Right now, I think so. Amylin is going to be the next generation as basis of again a drug that curbs your energy intake, but we can only go so far. Cagrilema is probably going to be the last final common pathway in terms of reducing your food intake, because if you stop eating, then obviously you will lose weight, but what's the fun in that in the end, basically? So I think if we go back to the first law of thermodynamics, there's two ways that you can increase or decrease your weight, is either by decreasing your food intake or increasing your energy expenditure. So the energy expenditure, that's been examined all the way back in the 1930s with DNP, and we all know about that story. And obviously there's been recent attempts by, and still ongoing attempts by Rivas and also Bio, to make that in a way more controlled fashion. But I think the energy expenditure part of the whole thing here is something that needs to give some attention, because basically if we can keep energy expenditure at the same level during a weight loss period, then basically we can reduce the dose of the incretins, meaning that if we reduce the dose of the incretins, then we can also, to a large extent, get away with some of the side effects that are mostly seen in the higher doses. So basically trying to look at this as a little bit more holistic, that we can't just hammer on one mode of action, but basically go broader. So that's one, that's huge and super difficult and also super dangerous to go after, but we should. Then there is obviously, I would say, we've been studying gut-brain axis, and that's basically where we are still, after 15 years, we are still looking at the gut-brain axis as the final common pathway. But there was a time before 2010, then the brain was actually the key asset, right? So you needed to go to the brain in order to have an effect on body weight. And I see some evidence that we are returning to the brain in terms of finding new targets. And it seems to be the new technology and the sophistication, and as Base said, also how we can target it using more sophisticated AI models. We can go and look for targets that are sitting behind the blood-brain barrier with small molecules and other stuff. And I think that's going to be, at least over the next 10 years, going to be where we're going to look and going to see the next big breakthroughs. And then the final comment is that when we say incretins, in fact, we say 16% or 22 or 28% now with Reza. But every response that we have in weight loss therapies, it's normally distributed. So you have somebody that loses 40%, but you also have somebody that loses 5%. And we've seen that with semaglutide, and we've seen that with tirzepatide. There's a subset of people, like 25%, that doesn't really respond to the incretins. And 25% out of 1 billion, I can calculate, that's 250 million patients that do not respond to incretins. So that's, we're talking about 2% here, we're talking about at least 25%, but there is a different mode of action, including new ways of curbing your energy intake. So there is a lot of things to do, David.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe one different perspective on it too. I mean, as somebody who launched Zepbound and 2 years ago didn't have enough of it for demand, it's kind of crazy that the incretins are yesterday's news already, or the GLP-1 dual agonist is kind of yesterday's news already. So I think that's a core part of what I'll be working on, and we're working on at Kailera. I do think that the dual agonists and the GLP-1s are going to be the foundation of care. So all the novel mechanisms either had the opportunity to identify who truly doesn't respond, and or have the opportunity, like amylins, et cetera, to think about how do you work with a GLP-1 or after a GLP-1 or something like that, because I think it's going to be challenging in this primary care driven market to really, completely disrupt, if you will, the incretin base or the GLP-1 base, especially given the level of evidence that's there. So this is very, very much a long game here. There's way too many people to help. I think the dual agonism in particular, at least that's the thesis for Kailera, is here to stay. And the greater weight loss is one of the many problems that are yet to be addressed.
And the one thing I'll add to the question is I think if people are looking at novel MOAs, and we certainly considered that at Alveus when we were building the portfolio, Again, if you believe that you need more weight loss, then I guess you can go at it for a lot of different novel therapies. But if you're thinking, wait a minute, we've hit, there's so much out there for weight loss. I have to do something different, whether it's non-responders, whether it's improved tolerability. GLPs are burdened with tolerability issues. Non-selective amylin agents are burdened with tolerability issues. And so again, if you're looking for something strategic in development that's different, that's what you need to look at. Another thing that's very interesting, you hear anecdotes, and I don't think it's really well understood right now with GLPs. It affects appetite, it affects pleasure centers, it affects reward centers. Is one reason people are dropping off because after a while it's just burdensome to take something that takes away pleasure in eating or takes away pleasure in wine? I don't know the answer to that, but when you're thinking about novel MOAs, where do you go to address some of these other things that are really interesting that have not been addressed thus far?
We did talk about in our pre-panel call, we did talk about access and reimbursement. I understand that that's a little bit of a sidestep from pipeline innovation, though, maybe not. I mean, there are different ways that existing products, whether it's through dose reduction and maintenance type therapies or in kind of a future world where, you can get more towards like a one and done type situation. But how does this group and with increasingly with self-pay adoption increasing, how far can that go? So if you expand the question of unmet need to include financial toxicity, which is arguably within this context, I'm wondering if anyone on the panel, whether it's Anna or Jamie or anyone else, wants to kind of briefly weigh in on that.
Sure, I can start. I don't think it's a sidestep at all, because what's the point of innovation if people can't afford it and if it's not bringing value to society? So I don't think it's a sidestep. I mean, this is clearly, going way back to my beginning statement, I think many of the affordability and access challenges we have across the world, not just in the United States, are due to the inherent bias that's in the system, that this is a lifestyle disease and you should just fix it on your own. So I believe the more we solve that, the more we'll see access. Access is very dynamic, but I quite honestly am optimistic. A matter of weeks from now, we're going to have 20 million people-ish who've never have access through Medicare, so that's going to be very exciting to watch. Dave mentioned Cigna this morning. We can come back to that because it actually relates a lot to self-pay. But in general, more and more employers are looking for ways to meet the demand of their employees. It's been studied many times that employees they lose motivation when their employers drop it. They go to companies because there's obesity coverage. Like, this is going to become a competitive disadvantage for employers if they don't cover these in the long run. I understand the budget issues, and that's why they're looking for different ways to be able to do it and meet the clinical needs. So I think access is, broadly speaking, moving in the right direction, although there's way more that has to be done. That'll be in real world evidence, that may be in pricing, et cetera. But my general belief is that it goes well beyond just pricing. We've seen Lilly and Novo respond to pricing pressures and see that come through in elasticity. So there's plenty of, I think, room to grow there on that. I think self-pay is a really interesting one. I think it's a double-edged sword, to be honest. We can maybe come back to that one a little bit. But I personally think it has a ceiling because most Americans can't afford self-pay prices, especially as a chronic disease.
I guess the only thing I would add is that obesity is not a U.S. disease. Yeah. It's a global phenomenon, and the affordability and access also in the other parts of other countries, it's also very important to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's self-pay in almost every other market outside of the U.S., and so those same biases and challenges exist. Thank you.
Yeah, so just adding on to that, and I don't know if any of you have any sense for it, but is there any hope for government coverage to increase for obesity drugs ex-US in the next year or so? Like, is there any movement on that front at all?
France just announced last week that they were adding it. It's kind of similar to what's in the UK, so it's BMI of 40 or higher. I mean, it's very highly restricted, but it's a start. So I would say I think there's hope Dave, but that one's probably slow moving.
Yeah, I think it's unrealistic. I'm from Denmark, Scandinavian countries. It's almost entirely self-pay. There are indications. It's massive obesity with a BMI of plus 40. You can get it reimbursed, but it's also widely accepted that you pay. Basically, also speaking to the fact that it's seen more something that's your own problem and not the problem of like if you had cancer or anything, then you wouldn't ask people to pay for themselves. But that's the reality in Europe in many countries.
Yeah, there's an interesting criterion in some of our, we're running global trials for Rebupatide, and some of the feedback we've gotten from regulatory agencies is questioning the placebo control, which is required by the FDA, so that's why you do it. But it's kind of funny, why are you questioning me on the placebo if you think it should be a standard of, there should have an active comparator standard of care, but you're actually not paying for it. Yeah. So it's a kind of a funny, contrary perspective, yeah.
Well,
or contradictory perspective.
Hopefully, Rebupatide will deliver the superior efficacy and drive greater coverage.
We'll see what we can do.
Maybe a discussion point with Jamie and others on the panel. So we did some market research, going outside U.S., Europe, in developing countries and so forth. How the healthcare system, self-pay system, is working, and how the less than frequent dosing, like every month, quarter, every 6 months. And some market research data is pretty interesting because it has to do with how you price it. Because people can only, in these countries or economy, these regions, people can only pay month by month because their income is check by check. If you do a every 6 months regimen, dosing frequency, how do you price it? Because they will not be able to afford paying one time for 6 months. That's a real challenge for a large portion of the world. So for pharma or biotechs, we need to really ponder through that issue.
Yeah, I mean, the self-pay market behaves differently than the covered market. Maybe that's obvious, but because you have price as a consideration versus, a low copay, the persistency is lower, the spreading of dosing is higher, et cetera. So it's really not setting people with obesity up to truly improve their care and get great outcomes. It's helping people lose weight, right, which is part of this, but the whole conversation up here has been about outcomes and chronic disease. So I think it's a good opportunity because coverage is not there. But if we really want to move the needle, then we have to create innovations that get coverage so that people can get the outcomes that they deserve.
Well, I think we just had one final topic, but if there are any questions from the audience, feel free to put your hand up. But just looking ahead, I think we've already been talking about specific novel mechanisms, but if there's anything that we haven't already touched on, also maybe looking at your crystal ball, what might surprise the field over the next few years? Or what are some areas that we think aren't getting as much attention, but that might become more kind of front of mind going forward? And I'll put that to anyone who wants to opine.
I'll open up with that, and I think right now, for regulatory purposes, you need to show weight loss, and then if you're able to maintain weight loss after that, that's great. If you have a mechanism where you actually are unable to generate weight loss, but if the weight loss had been generated, you could actually maintain it very, very effectively, that would open up a whole set of additional mechanisms that could be very interesting. So the question is, how much pressure will there be on regulatory authorities over the coming years to say, wait a minute, if something can maintain weight, that is an indication. You don't have to have a weight loss component. Right now you do. Will there be more work with regard to how to approve muscle building agents? Maybe those at least that are functional muscle, which is a very different aspect from things that are perhaps being in development right now. So I think these sort of regulatory questions are interesting and could open up a whole new set of targets that are available that are not really effective unless you have access to a weight loss agent that you can co-formulate or something.
Maybe I will make a comment on. We're talking about cardiometabolic health, but overall, we're talking about improving healthy living. And it is estimated that with normal BMI, even though BMI is not the best measurement as we talked about earlier today, with normal BMI, the odds of an average person reaching 70 years of age is about 80%. But if the BMI is 35 to 40, that odds is reduced to about 60%. And it's further reduced to 50% if the BMI is 45 to 50. So now with this very effective obesity treatment, we're effectively maybe prolonging the longevity of healthy living. So by reducing all these comorbid conditions, improvement. So how do we leverage all these benefits? Like Brian, you mentioned the FDA recent, just a week or two ago, there was a longevity aging conference organized by FDA was in attendance, but it was really a big challenge. How do you have any endpoints to capture these health benefits? Essentially, people are living longer, healthy lives, but what are the endpoints? So hopefully in the next 5, 10, 15 years, the regulatory science will really evolve, and there will be many more real-world evidence generated to really propel this to go forward.
And endpoints for regulators, but also perhaps for payers.
Yeah, for payers, yeah.
We do have a question in the back of the room. I know we only have a couple more minutes left.
Yeah, I'm with the Life Sciences Fund, and there are a lot of exciting, deserving companies here. Excited to meet the two majors that are on the panel for sure. We sold one of our portfolio companies to Lilly, before that Biogen, and before that AstraZeneca. And at the time, AstraZeneca had a 60-plus member due diligence team. Now I understand the due diligence team is over 100. So how do you suggest a small company engage and keep engaged major pharma like yourselves in order to get through a process? What are your thoughts on that?
I guess I can go ahead and get started. One is open the dialogue, keep us also disciplined. For us, please also see that, if we're putting 100 people on this case, it's obviously very important. So it's also a good sign that we are definitely interested. But I think what we can all try to do is really focus on what are really the key, what we call deal killers. What are really the key questions that each company, because each company, it may be different. What do we need to make sure that the strategic fit of this asset is correct for us, that we're the right partner for you and your portfolio companies? So I think we can work together to try to make the process more efficient. But we're definitely also very aware that it can be a burden for small companies. We want to, of course, keep the programs running as fast as possible because time to market is always the most important. But open the dialogue and help both sides be disciplined.
It was just 2 points on the next generation. I think one thing is it's going to be that there will need to come a tectonic shift in how we treat obesity. So as I think David from Zealand said, we need to start treating people when they get sick, not when they have fully established sickness. So you start treating when they're at BMI 27. That can go a long way in terms of reducing both the dose and the side effects. So start early. And the other thing is that what I sort of started my career on in 1993 was finding the body weight set point that needs to be somewhere in the brain. I think that somebody who finds that will find the sort of the golden card. So that's my 2 things. So.
Well, I think with that, I'm going to thank the organizers, thank my panelists, thank the audience, thank my co-moderator. We have a wonderful panel with Jay and Mike coming up. But thank you all for your attention, and looking forward to a good weekend. And